Hello, Joe the CRM chap here with another video in my series of deep dive developer tutorials for Dynamics 365 customer engagement. The topic for today's video is on how we go about creating a simple JScript function from start to finish. So we'll show you how you can create the function, write the function, deploy that out into the application, and then see how it works in practice. And as part of that, you hopefully walk away with a good sense on how to then go about and look at creating your own function for the first time. We want to try and get into the coding aspect of the video quite quickly, and as part of that, we'll be fairly quick and dirty in terms of how we execute the demo. What we want to try and emphasize as part of that is just how easy it is to work with JScript functions. It's not a bugbear, it's not this massive scary thing which you have to run away from. It can be relatively straightforward to do, and also so we can emulate as best as possible a real life scenario so that you can then walk away and then think about how you can use what you've learned within your own business or within your own projects in the future. What I'll look at doing is in the comments below I'll put a link on there for an accompanying blog post where I'll upload the slide deck and the completed solution files and any other information which may be useful related to this video. It's not going to be essential that you've had experience with some of the topics that we talk about here. We're going to take things fairly step by step and not assume that you're an expert in any of these things, although if you have worked with things such as Visual Studio, the application itself, or even have done some JScript coding in the past, it's going to be quite useful when we get into the demo. So the first thing that we need to make sure we fully explain is the application itself, Dynamics 365 Customer Engagement. You may have known it under a previous guise. It was until very recently known as Dynamics CRM until it was rebranded as Dynamics 365. The key driver behind this was to start to emphasize the modular nature of the application as a whole. So for example, if you've got a requirement for your colleagues within the business or within businesses that you're working with, for individuals to go out into the home and do home visits or visits to businesses and capture information as a result of arising from that visit, you can very quickly deploy a mobile application along with a system in the sort of the home office that then feeds that information through and enables real-time information to start synchronizing through. So you can add that into your business fairly quickly. As you grow and as you develop, you can then look at bolting on additional modules, such as if you wanted to have a full lead management process, you could look at the sales module. If you wanted to develop a customer-facing portal for people to log support queries in, you can look at the customer service module, and you only sort of use and consume and, more crucially, pay for what you need. And then the other benefit of the application overall is that because it sits very firmly within the Microsoft ecosystem, when you're looking at integrations with things such as Office 365 and Exchange Server, these can be accomplished very straightforwardly and more crucially natively within the application without needing to resort to custom code. Although you have got the option, either in terms of the application itself, in terms of adding fields on, adding new data categories or data types, these can be added onto the system within the application itself through no coding. And as we can see in these video series, you can extend that further through code as well. So, and there's a whole load of different other things as well, which I'm probably not giving justice as part of the application as a whole, but this hopefully gives you a good flavour in terms of what it can do and the potential that it can have for your business if you're using it. In terms of availability, you can get it both as a cloud subscription based application, so similar to your other Office 365 products where you pay a monthly subscription per user. You can also look at getting an on-premise version of the application as well through volume licensing. In most cases you probably are going to look towards the cloud version of the application where possible, particularly given if you are using some form of Office 365 already within your business. Okay, so we've set the background a little bit in terms of what Dynamics is. So Dynamics 365 is, so we can now jump into and explain what JScript form functions are. So within the application, you've got your data forms, your entity forms, where you can add your fields on, you can have your subgrids and your various other components on the form. If you've got a requirement to do specific business logic as part of that, what JScript enables you to do is to add on custom code to do things such as change a field value, modify a label name based on a condition, or even look at integrating with the application web API to do things such as retrieve, create, update records, all based on input or action done on the form itself. The good thing about these JScript functions as well is that they work on both the web and tablet versions of the application. With some very minor restrictions, you may find that certain methods or certain functions that are exposed to you in the application just won't work within the tablet version of the app, but for the most part you should be okay. You don't have to then worry about developing things separately. It's just going to work based on regardless of where you are. When deploying them out, you look at configuring a web resource within the application, and then you set up your event handlers on your form, and you've got quite a few handlers that you can essentially piggyback onto as part of to determine when your function executes. So for example, the ones this is on here, on load for when the form loads, when a field value changes, on change, when the form's saved, on save, or even when a user expands or collapses a tab using the tab change state method. There are other event handlers, but these are probably going to be the key ones that you work with initially with JScript functions. If you have got some experience or familiarity with business rules, then you will already have by association a good idea of what JScript can do. Business rules are in effect JScript functions that you can configure within the application. They will be using a lot of the same types of methods and functions that are exposed to you from a developer point of view to execute and do the functions they are. So you can, based on what you know about business rules, you can then go in and make a pretty good guess in terms of what a JScript can achieve. Although, as we'll sort of go on to towards the end of the video, you should always make sure that you choose carefully and don't always realise what business rules can do before you start considering writing your first JScript function. So we've talked quite a bit at this stage about what JScript is. It's generally referred to as interchangeably. JScript is essentially Microsoft's implementation of the JavaScript language. When you're looking at examples online, when you're looking at people talking about JScript or JavaScript functions, they are essentially the same thing. They are referred to interchangeably. For consistency purposes in this video, and based on what the SDK documentation says, I'm going to refer to them as JScript, but essentially they are the same thing, so don't be too fazed by that if you start to see different language referred to when you're doing your own research. As a language, it's quite possibly one of the most commonly used languages today, because it will be on pretty much every website that you go and visit today. So even probably YouTube, where you're watching this video on, it's probably using JScript somewhere in order to deliver the video to you. From a syntax point of view, it's going to be very similar to C# and Java, so if you have got some experience working with those languages, it's not going to be too difficult for you to start to get to grips with JScript. So don't worry too much about the learning curve around that. However, if you do want to try and get some tutorials or get some help to help write your first function, then there's a number of different tutorials online that can help you. W3 Schools, for example, which I linked to in this slide, do a number of really great beginner-oriented tutorials, so I would recommend that you go through those and work through those if you are stuck on anything. So we set the scene now around what we're going to be working with in the demonstration to follow, so now's a good time to take a look at the scenario that we're going to be working through. So this one here is actually based on a real-life problem that I dealt with a couple of years back. So we're working within the UK for a UK-based company who are using CRM or Dynamics 365 customer engagement to manage their leads and their sales management. One of the directors has noticed that the address labels within the application are all using American-style naming labels. So, for example, you've got the state and province field. Generally, in the UK, we probably refer to that as the county. Likewise, you've also got the zip postal code field. Again, we would probably refer to it in the UK as the postcode. So he's noticed that, and we need to try and essentially get that fixed. So we've gone into the application and we've changed things around for the field labels to basically rename those accordingly. But then when we go onto the composite address fields, we notice that those display name labels aren't updating correctly based on the changes made into the customization. So what we need to look at doing is deploying a onload JScript function for the lead entity form that will then go through and correctly update the composite address labels to their required values. This is something that we have to do via JScript because we've got no way to be able to modify that ourselves through the application interface. So without further ado, let's jump into the demo and start writing our first JScript function. We're in the application now on just a test lead entity record form with just some basic details populated onto there. One change that I have made within the application already is that I've added on a field here for county. So if we go onto the form editor, we can view the properties of that in a bit more detail to see which is. At the moment, it's using an existing field that you get out of the box within the application. So we'll give that a second just to load. Yeah, so if we scroll down, just double click on the field on here, and then go into the details tab, I believe it is. Yeah, we can see that we've taken the existing address1 underscore state of province field and we've renamed that to county. So by default that would be state/province in the application, but we've already done the step to sort of anglicise it as we've discussed when setting the scene for a particular scenario. So that's working as we want it to, but then when we go onto the composite address field, which is on here on there, we can see that it's not actually picking up the changes on there. We've still got state of province on there, and we've still got zip/postal code on there as well. So what we can look at doing is that we have got a way of being able to rename these composite field values, but we have to look at doing the JScript form function to be able to do that. There's no way within the application that we can actually go on and modify the individual field name properties for the composite address field. So we're going to look at creating the function then. Now there's really no best way of being able to do this. In this example, we're going to use Visual Studio to create a project and store the code in there. If you wanted to, you could look at just creating a notepad file, write the code in there and save it down. It's entirely up to you. I think one of the assets of using Visual Studio, particularly if you're doing other types of development involving the application, is that you can start to bring it all together into one project, so that it's all in one place and in a sort of tidy manner. So in this particular example, we're just going to create a brand new project, and any edition of Visual Studio will be fine for this. You could use the Community Edition, use Professional. It doesn't really matter on there, because all we're going to do is we're just going to create a brand new project. It's going to be a blank solution, and then within there we're just going to add on our JScript file as literally just a one file project. So we open up the new project window, we go to Visual Studio Solutions and blank solution, and I'm just going to give this a name of D365 sample JScript, and that'll go off and create that. Okay, so with our solution created, then we can look at adding on our the JScript file that we're going to work with. So I'm going to right click on the project and go to new item. We'll then get a list of the most common file or developer file types that you'll probably want to work with in Visual Studio. As we can see on the top in here, we've got one for JavaScript file that we can use. So I'm just going to rename this from script1. I generally follow a naming convention in terms of if you're working with solutions in the application, use the same solution prefix for that, give it an underscore descriptor of what it is for the web resource, and then the entity that's affecting as well. I generally try and have specific web resources scope to a particular entity, and then have that shared across the various forms. There's really no mandatory way that that you can to do this. It's really down to personal preference. I think the only thing I just recommend is just be consistent with it, and just make sure you do something that works for you and is most comfortable for you ultimately. So we'll create that JScript file, and it should open up in the window for us straight away. Okay, so we just get a very basic, just a template file there with just a line of commented code on there. We're just going to remove that because we don't really need that as part of the function. So with that deleted, then we can start to create our JScript function. Now, there is no way in which that we can essentially, similar to maybe developing in C#, you've not got IntelliSense or anything like that at your disposal when you're developing your JScript. So you're going to have to. It is potentially more prone to issues, if because of typos or whatever like that. So it's always important just to keep in mind that what you may assume maybe something very straightforward to do from a JScript point of view may take longer than you expected because of all the error debugging that you need to do. But the first thing we need to do with our JScript file is to declare our function. So it's just going to be just type out function. We give it a fairly descriptive name. We've not got any parameters that we're going to be working with as part of this function. If we did, then we'd specify them within there, and then you can then feed through the parameters and access them further down in the code. In terms of when you're naming the functions, one of the recommended things that that you see or people do is in terms of making sure that you camel case the function, but always keep the first letter in lowercase. Again, down to personal preference. Just be consistent with it ultimately when you're doing things. So with the function declared, we can get into actually the operation of actually being able to rename the forms. And to do that, we need to essentially retrieve the composite address control. And then once we've retrieved that as an object, we've then got the ability to then modify its label name to a value that we specify. So to do that, we have to access some of the XRM sort of functions that are exposed to the client when you work with an interface. So in this particular case, you've got the xrm.page.getControl method that you can use to do that. You then need to give it the name of the particular control. So for composite controls, it's a little bit complicated in terms of how the naming for that, but it follows a fairly simple format. You generally have the name of the composite field control, so there'll generally be multiple ones on there, address 1, address 2 on there. You then have the composition link control on there, and then after the underscore on there, you've got the field name, which should correspond to what it is in the application. A little bit convoluted, but it gets us to where we need to be. So once we've retrieved the object, as I say, we then just need to do a set label onto there, and we can then feed that any value that we want. So in this particular case, at the moment, it's currently on as street 1. We would generally in the UK possibly refer to it as maybe address line 1 or address 1. That would generally be the format that we do. So in this case, we're just going to set it to address 1. And then now it's just a case that we need to replicate this for all of the different fields that we've got available to us within the composite control. So as we can see, we've got 7 fields in total. So to do that, we can just very quickly just copy and paste this using Control C and then Control V this out for the number of times that we need. So 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. With that done, we can then go into each of our particular fields and just change them to our need to be. So for the address lines, it's fairly straightforward. Just need to change the number at the end, 3 in total. The next one after that will be our city, which we're just going to change to town on here. Our next one would be our state or province. Be like so. So we change that to county. We've then got our postal code, which we're going to change to postcode, or postal code rather. And then finally we've got our country, which we're just going to change to country. Okay. So chances are 9 times out of 10 you're going to have the address 1 composite control field on your form as well. It could be that you also have the requirement to store additional address information. So if you're working with a lead, for example, you may store the information relating to, if it's a lead or company, a branch office as address 1, but then in the address line 2 you then record maybe the business correspondence address or the address that's registered on company's house. On this particular example, we haven't got that on the form, so we've only got the address 1 composite control on this form. So what we're going to do is we're going to add in a bit of logic so that okay, if the address 2 composite control is on the form, then we're going to change the labels accordingly. If we try and add on the code and don't do that check first, then chances are we're going to get an error when the form loads for the first time, because it's trying to change fields that aren't on there. So to do that, we just need to do an if statement to be able to just do a quick test to see if the control is on the form. So I'm just going to do get control, and then I'm going to grab that onto there to save us a little bit of time. So it's going to be address 2 there, and then address 2 line 1. So that's our function on there. And then we're just going to add in our function to be able to change that. So we'll grab that again. We need our quotation marks because it's a string, and then we're going to do set label again. Address 1. Okay, so that's our first field done, and then we just need to replicate that for each of the occurrences that we're doing it for. So 7 in total, so 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, what it's done there, it's generally you would see it written like it's indicated on there. So we'll just change the first one so it's like that, so it's basically fairly consistent, and it's not using as many line spaces as well. Okay, so we just need to basically make the appropriate modifications to each of these again. So it'll be address line 2 on this, which we change to address 2, address line 3 on here. Okay, this is going to be our city. Which we change to town. It might be quicker just to grab them from here actually. Based on the fingers at least. So state of province, county. Postal code, we'll just grab that up there. I'd like to think this is definitely a lot quicker than having to write it out all again. And then finally we've got our country. And then we should be there with it. Okay. Okay, so I think we're pretty much there with it then in terms of the function. So that is our JScript function, our first JScript function. So we're just going to save that now then. And then at this point then we need to look again into the application and then performing a test just to make sure it works as expected. So I'm going to go back to the application now. I'm just going to open up a new window on here so that we can quickly get back to that lead record if we need to. And then once it opens up, we're going to want to go into settings and solutions. Now, when you're working with anything within the application, just get rid of that. You should always be using a solution. You should never really be going into the default solution and creating things within there. It all should be done via either an unmanaged or a managed solution. And as part of that, you should have a publisher configured onto there with the solution prefix on there. So in this case, we're using the solution prefix of CRM chap on there. I don't know why it keeps doing that, but let's just close that. We're using the solution prefix of CRM chap, and then that way you can make sure that that's always included on when you're creating your objects and your fields and stuff like that. So we've just got a test solution on here with just a couple of things added onto it. What we're going to do is we're going to go into our web resources, and we're going to create a brand new web resource from scratch. So if we go to new up here, I'm going to give it a name. We're going to call it the same name that we've called it on the project, and as you can see, because we're working with the solution, it's automatically picked up our solution prefix, which is nice. We're going to call it lead JScript library. We're going to give it a description, which is always really recommended. And there's going to be a type of JScript onto there. And we've got two options in terms of getting the code up into the application. We can either use the text editor and do a copy and paste, or we can actually browse to our JScript file and upload it. So let's do that option there. So as you can see, it's picked up our folder and project that we're working with on here, and it's picked up our JScript file on there. So we're just going to open that up there. We're going to just set the language to English. It's not really required that, but we'll just do it anyway, and then we're going to save that. And when it's saved, we can do a quick check just to make sure that the code's uploaded correctly. We do that by going to text editor, and as we can see, all of our code that we've been working with can be found within there, which is really good. So with that done, we can save, just do another save again, and then the most important thing is that we need to then publish that out, because otherwise we won't be able to have access to it when we're working with our form in a few moments. So let's just publish that out now. Give it a minute to do. Okay, so with our web resource in the solution, then we can go to our lead entity. We're going to go onto the form, and we're just going to modify the default main form that we've got exposed to us. So we'll double click to open that there. And once we're on the form, we're going to want to go into the form properties, and this is where we essentially do a two-step process. We attach our web resource to the form, and then we add on our event handler so the code can execute. So let's add on the web resource first by going to add on there. We'll do a quick search for it, so we'll search using the prefix and it should pick it up. Yep, it has done there. So add that to the form, and then we're going to want to do our event handler onto there. So as you can see, we've got onload and onsave. We're going to want to do it as onload so that every time the form loads, we get it executing correctly. And then all we just need to do on here is specify the name of our function. So just to make sure I'm not doing any typos, I'm just going to grab the function name from within Visual Studio. I'm going to copy and paste that into there. At this point, if you're working with parameters, you can pass parameters through here as a comma separated list. Alternatively, if you're wanting to access information regarding the execution context, you can pass that as a parameter as well. So you've got some options there with your function to contextually, to have your function perform things based on contextual things that are happening within the form itself, which is really quite useful. You may notice as well we don't need to put our open and close brackets onto there, it's just literally just the form function name we need on there. So we click OK on that, we click OK again, and then all we just need to do is just do a save and a publish. We'll do a publish on the form itself, and just to make sure we'll also do a publish all. It's always really important just to, even if it does take a little bit longer, just make sure that you always publish things out correctly, because that 9 times out of 10, if something's not working when you made a change in the application, it's probably down to the fact that it's not been published yet. So we'll give that a minute just to finish off, and then we should be able to go back onto our lead entity record form. Okay, that's done. So we go back onto our John Smith record, just need to do a quick refresh to make sure that it's picking up the updated form definitions on our new code. And we should be able to verify that the JScript function is working as expected straight away, because we'll get the we'll see that the form fields are updated correctly when the form loads. Okay, so our form's just finishing off loading now, so if we go to our address field onto there, we can see that all of our address fields are now been renamed correctly, which confirms that our JScript function is working as expected. So that is, from start to finish, how to create a JScript function. Well, I hope the demo has been useful and gives you enough to go away and start looking at developing your first or second or wherever you're up to with JScript. Gives you the confidence to go away and start looking at how you can use it yourself. The only thing I just want to leave you with is a couple of recommendations and things just to bear in mind when you're first starting out. So I alluded to this earlier in the video. The main thing that you want to always ensure is that you fully scoped out and considered business rules before you start moving towards JScript to achieve your requirements. Business rules as a feature within the application have come a long way, particularly in recent years, to the point now where a lot of the simple things that you would generally in the past do with JScript, such as change a field, hide a field based on this, etc., a business rule is going to be more than capable of handling that. So review your requirements, have a play about with business rules as a first step. If you're not too sure, only then would I then suggest you start looking at JScript as a resort to meet your requirements. Another thing to always keep in mind is around the event handlers and how they always need to be scoped to an individual form. So in the example that we shown in the demo, we have to go onto our main form and we have to configure the event handlers for just that form. It's not going to then get cascaded out to other forms in the application. So if you are working with multiple forms in the application and want to ensure the same functionality is replicated across the board, you will need to go in there into each form and make sure your event handlers are configured accordingly. When it comes to things not working with your JScript functions or you needing to start to debug them, that's when developer tools and F12 developer tools comes into play. The process for this is always going to be a little bit different based on what web browser you're using. So also just bear that in mind when you first need to go start to debug things. What I may look at doing in the future is doing a dedicated video on JScript debugging, because it is quite an extensive topic and can be quite difficult to sort of get your head around with when you're trying to figure out, okay, well, why is my JScript not working? Why isn't it doing this when I want it to, type thing. So to move on then, so when you start to add a lot of functions onto your form, another thing to always keep an eye on is your form load times. If you've got a lot of functions on there doing quite a lot of things, maybe doing external calls to either within the application or to external systems, particularly if it's on load function as well, your load times for your forms are going to start being impacted on that. So always make sure if you're adding something substantial onto your form from a JScript point of view, check to make sure that your load times on your forms aren't growing too excessively. And if they are, then you will need to go away and look at a bit more detail on what you can do to reduce that. And then finally, with your code, it's always a good idea to think about, particularly when you're working with teams, how you can sort of store that within a suitable environment. So this is where things such as Git code repositories come into their element. You can start to then look at things such as code, rolling back your code if there's a problem. You can look at team collaboration, tracking your changes. There's a whole wealth of different features out there. So I would recommend it, particularly if you're doing other development within the application as well. Start to work with a Git repository of your choosing and start to take advantage of these features as well, because they are going to help you a lot in the long term. Okay, so thank you very much for watching the video. If you do have any questions at all, feel free to leave them in the comments below and I'll do my best to get back to you. You can also follow me on Twitter as well using the handle there. I'd welcome any suggestions or questions through there for future video content or anything that you wanted to talk about on there. Feel free to drop me a message. You can also subscribe to the channel as well and get a notification when new videos are uploaded. So be sure to do that if you found this useful. So thank you very much again. Take care and see you again.